Welcome to Between the Cracks. My name is Dart. Today I'm joined by.
Hello, hello. It's Derek from One Over Tea and Tao Teaware.
That's right, that's right. Ooh, buddy. Are you drinking Dan Song tonight?
Yeah, I'm drinking Dan Song. Some fresh spring Dan Song that we just got. Wait, spring Dan Song? It's August? Uh-oh. Yeah, I just did a reel about that.
I have something else to talk about. So I have stains. Okay, there's stains all over my shirt. This actually reminds me of living back in China. Two things. One, I didn't own any light clothes when I lived in China because everything is like in sauce or soup form. And so once in the process of slurping, I always, I always got stuff on my shirts. And so that actually happened tonight. I just got some fang bian mian, some like Asian ramen, um, and got noodle sauce all over.
Yeah, man. I mean, you gotta slurp the nudes when you're here, and it's the most deadly thing in the world for a white shirt. Remember, like the jackets the school would give us? I'd put on my jacket backwards as like as a shield, and I would slurp my noodles to my heart's content. Otherwise, it's like every single meal, I'm like, there's new stains on my nice, button up. I like this weird kind of flex when you see people just wearing pure white and they're like eating noodles or hot pot and they have no concern.
I don't understand. I don't. There's people that do. Like, I've never been someone who's been able to keep white clothes clean ever. But it's especially impressive, yeah, with like hot pot and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah. But so me actually doing this, spilling this reminded me, I paid, I don't know, 80 cents for the bag of noodles, right? And I had two of them. And I miss, for that same price, I could have got a fresh hand pulled bowl of noodles at any La Mienne in China. And I just realized, like, I don't long for living there anymore, but man, I miss some fresh food for less than $2.
It's wild because like yeah, lami in here they're like, oh, it's just like fast food, like Chinese fast food, and I'm like, no, it's literally fast because you get in there, you order, and you eat it, but it's all made from scratch. Like they're making the noodles with flours, they're pulling it, it's just vegetables, meat, and noodles and soup, and like the soup they've been stewing all day and all night, like. It's definitely my favorite thing, and Chinese people still laugh when I tell them la mian's my favorite.
It's just a classic. Like, it's not the most exquisite food. Although honestly, a lot of it's really good. Like the curry, like the gali jinan chao fan, like the curry egg fried rice is amazing. The cumin lamb is amazing. And then depending, like, I feel like every la mian has like one thing they do better. Like some of them do the fried better, some of them like the straight like normal la mian is better. But like, no, it's so good.
La mian's funny. It's like the Starbucks of China, where it's like they're everywhere and they're almost exactly the same. Where it's like you walk into any la mian restaurant in any corner of China and you know what to expect. And like you said, like some places will do certain things better, some things will do certain things worse, but you know the same price, you know the same dishes, you know the same, it's halal, and so they have this huge attention to the meat they're using, and so it's very clean in that sense, and it's everywhere from the south to the north to the east to the west, like in the smallest town in China. Usually I can find a lamian, and usually it's like there's nothing, I know I'm totally unfamiliar with this area, and I see a lamian, I'm like, oh, thank god. This is my axis.
Which honestly, I kind of feels like the opposite of the goal. Like when you go and you first get to China and you're like, I want to try everything new, right? Like everything is interesting, everything is exciting. Like the first time that I went out to, I think Shaokao with Alex, and they made me try, or well, he didn't make me try, but offered, oh, like, do you want lamb balls? And I was like lamb balls? And he's like, yeah. I was like, okay, sure. I mean, it's just, it's like, or pig brains with Demi at Hot Pot, right? Like it's fun the first time. It's not very good. Have you had pig brains?
It's Yeah, it's weird. It tastes like the tofu. It tastes like really soft tofu, has no real flavor in itself, and it's like, for me, it's like chalky in the mouth. It's a weird consistency.
It's like if you like mixed really fine grained sand and chalk.
Ugh, ugh, don't. It's funny. I have a story about the other Alex. Like we were traveling in, I think, Anhui, and I'm like, oh yeah, let's just get some food. I saw a lamian over here, and Alex is like, you're not eating lamian. This is Anhui. Anhui is like one of the eight famous like cuisines in China, and I'm like, okay, okay. We ate some Anhui food. It was okay. It was not my favorite. I wish I had lamian.
It's it's hard that we. I mean, and I more stumbled. You more intentionally. Like I looked up Yangzhou and was like, okay, this looks like a cool city. I know there's like a good bit more backstory of why you ended up in Yangzhou. For me, I was just like, I didn't want to be in a Beijing, Shanghai, right? And like Yangzhou looked like a pretty place that like met that smaller town of 4 million. Where I could actually learn Chinese, and that was the case because even like going back to Shanghai, there's nothing more frustrating for me than like going to Shanghai, going to order something like fast, like let's say a milk tea. I'm going to like a cocoa in Shanghai. Speak to them in Chinese, they respond to me in English. Speak to them more in Chinese, and like the no break in continuity. But I'm just like, oh, like if when I was learning Chinese, that was so hard to like. It's really easy to mimic the grammar, right? But it's really hard when you don't know the grammar, and so like that would have been so frustrating. I feel like when I didn't know more Chinese. So anyway, but Yangzhou food is so good.
Yangzhou food is fantastic, but Yangzhou itself is like it's a good food city. Like it's a meisher chengshu. And so you get so many different foods from so many different places in China. Like last night I had Chongqing hot pot, and this morning I had to postpone our meeting a little bit.
Bathroom.
Yeah, so Chongqing hot pot, you have just this pot of like boiling oil, and they just add huge amounts of peppers and spices to it, and it's so spicy. And the next day you pay for it, but it tastes so good when you're doing it. You're putting like strips of bacon into it, you're pulling it out, like you add more oil and in Chinese though they say it's like it's very shanghuo. So shanghuo, what does that mean?
Like raising heat, like raising fire.
Yeah. So like raising fire, yeah. So it ups your fire and your internal fire. And for somebody like me, like I in Chinese TCM, I have a lot of fire. I have a lot of yang energy. And so I need to cool my energy a lot more than I need to bring it up hot. And so this is getting deep into Chinese, like the TCM, but tea follows this too. Like certain teas are give you the shanghuo, certain teas qinghuo, right? And so for me, the roasted dancong oolongs is probably the last thing I want to be drinking right now because that has a lot of heat in it. And then something that would be good, like which I have in this pot over here, this is some cold brewed gong mei, right? And so it's cold brewed, really green, like white tea. And so this is what my body needs according to the Chinese TCM, and but this is what I want based on like my mood.
So that's funny because I remember like I did a live with Cody and Olivia yesterday, and I was telling them I don't know if I haven't talked about it in a long time publicly, but I was just letting everyone know how like the first couple of years of like brewing gongfu style, I was just like taking your scraps, right? Like all those like bags of I had no idea what the tea was, but like the first tea that I feel like I came to after that like 50 grams of Jinjun Mei that I had stored away because I didn't know what it was like white tea. And again, I'm very interested. Please tell me more because for me, that was, I always describe it to people as like, I have more than enough energy. I do not need any more. I don't need any more hype. I don't need any more added on. And the white tea was nice because, like, yeah, it has caffeine. Yes, it could keep you up. But, like, for me, it always brought me down. And that's kind of what I needed. Like, in general, I need more of that than, the raising up.
Yeah, and I think like that does tie in right to like the Chinese traditional medicine where it's all about balance. You think of the yin yang, right? You think of the two competing forces like equally in balance, even in like the widest arc of the yin energies, you have a little seed of yang. It's this idea that, everything's going to turn into its opposite in the yin yang. And then that is like the ideology that gets put into the traditional Chinese medicine. And so if you have a lot of heat in your body and you have a lot of cooling teas, like that's exactly what your body wants, and so that complements very well. But if you have like a lot of heat and then you add more heat and it's summer, like look at me where I was sweating all day and then eating Chongqing hot pot, super spicy. I didn't sleep well. I woke up and I started drinking like roasted oolong and I'm sweating again. I turned my AC off. This is probably not the most healthy thing. But in China, like they have this idea of yang sheng, and yang sheng is like a wellness. It's like cultivating your life energy. And so when you look at Chinese medicine versus Western medicine, I mean, one of the big things is like one is focused on wellness and the other is focused on sickness. One is upping your wellness and the other is curing your sickness.
Yeah, I think we talked about in another episode of Between the Cracks how like Josh he went to the hospital one time and he was like upset that the medicine wasn't designed to like it didn't directly immediately right cure him. And I think we talked about that, and you mentioned that you were talking about I forget which drug that we've like derived so many however many times. I don't know. You can speak back to it if you wanted to, but
No, I think I really just want to get more into the idea that food is medicine, that tea is medicine, that like this is this whole idea of wellness where it's not about the pills you get from the doctor, it's about how you're living your life. It's about, are you eating Chongqing hot pot in the middle of summer or are you drinking ice cold tea when you should be drinking warming teas? And so let me give you an example. Like some fruit, right, would be either shanghuo or qinghuo. Let me see if you can guess it. So a pear.
Qinghua. I'm gonna say Qinghua.
It's qinghuo. It's not so sweet. It can cool you down. Think of like a a mango. Qinghuo neutral. You can say neutral.
I'm gonna okay. Yeah, I didn't know neutral was an option. I feel like mango could be neutral. I don't know. Like I feel like citrus is like Shanghua. I have no idea. I literally have no idea. I would guess like citrus would be like Shanghua. Mango though, I don't know. It's kind of meaty. It's really sweet, but it's not. I don't know. Tell me what is it?
You answered your own question. You said it's really sweet. A lot of times when things are really sweet, they're going to be shanghuo. I brought up the pear versus the mango. Like, is a pear very sweet? It's like the least sweet fruit that I can think of.
You gotta have better pears, bro.
Yeah, well, I get the Chinese pears. So my fiance, she really likes peaches, and so like I'll buy her peaches. I'll buy her like really juicy peaches that are just like so succulent, so good, and she hates them. And then I'm like, what do you want? This is like a $10 peach. And she'll go buy peaches and they're rock hard, have like no sugar in them, and like taste like you're eating an apple. It's like that hard, that texture consistency. But for her, like she likes that Qinghuo, right? She doesn't like so much sweet, so much heat. Of course, there's a bunch of other foods like rich fatty foods, like meaty foods. Like these are all Shanghuo, right? And vegetables, usually Qinghuo, but depends on how you cook them because it's also like if you add heat to it, it makes it Shanghuo. I'm also thinking of like the weird teas you drink.
Oh my goodness, he's back on this again. Back on this again. 5 years later, 99% of the time I'm drinking pure single I can't stand you. Yes, I actually just did a reel this morning about some fruit and herbal blend from Snarky.
And so what's interesting about that is like some of those are specifically tailored for like Qinghuo, for like, like detoxing the liver, for detoxing the body and stuff like that. But then I think like there's the other ones that are just sweet, like the ones with like the rock sugar in them, right? Like that's probably not necessarily one of these traditional Chinese medicine teas. But you can also get those boxes of like, oh, here's goji berries, here's licorice root, astragalus root, and like a little bit of like yeah, other types of root vegetables in it, and just boil this and it's comes out so bitter. Yeah, usually another thing is if it's bitter, usually it's qinghuo, usually it's good for you, and if it's sweet, it's shanghuo.
Are you gonna tell us more about the dance song in this episode?
Like the different seasons.
No. Like the dance song that you're releasing next month. You're gonna tell us more about it, right?
You guys really want to know about it, huh?
Yes. Yes, I do. So yeah.
I mean, it does kind of go into your idea where it's just like, what are you drinking at this time? I just said like, oh, because of the Chinese TCM, I feel like I shouldn't be drinking this tea right now. And so as a result, like it's not really the tea I'm excited about. It's not the tea I really want to release right now. And then also it's like the makers, they're still roasting it. It's such a weird process where it's like when I first started sourcing dancing, I've been doing it for like 8 years now. I've been like going to Chaozhou, I've been going into the mountains, I've been talking to the farmers. A lot of times I'll see them picking in April, making the teas, and then in May they'll be like, "Hey, we got some teas." And I'm like, "Great, yeah, sell me the teas." And so when I first started doing it, I would release all of my dance songs like May, right? and then eventually like learning more of it, I'm laughing because that's not the right time to release dance song. And it comes into like multiple reasons because they need to process it more than that. But then you talk to different makers and they can have different ideologies on it. They could be like, "Oh yeah, you just need to rest it for 48 hours." It's like, "Oh really?" And then other makers is like, "Yeah, I rested for at least 7 to 9 days." You have 200 cultivars. A lot of these makers are making 70 plus different types of tea that are picked different times of the year. And then you have to process them individually, which is why it's called dan song, like one bush. And so you're processing all of your milan shang at the same time. You're processing all of your xingren shang at the same time.
Two questions for you. Two questions for you. First, why is Milan Shang so popular? Like, why is that like the one that everyone knows about?
That's a good question. I think it's very fragrant. It's on the nose. It's strong. It's powerful. It's the earliest cultivar to bloom usually, to germinate. It's the easiest to propagate, and so maybe it becomes this idea of like, yeah, they made it the most popular because it is the most common.
Another question. I was talking to somebody else about how I actually so in the live that we were on yesterday, Wenzi Tong actually popped on for a second, and I just used the last of my 8 Immortals from last year, which was, you had talked about it, right? The Batian, how amazing it was, and it was definitely, I don't know, if not my favorite, it was neck and neck with my second. No, it probably was my favorite from last year too. But I told someone that somebody was like, "Oh, I got your pomelo fragrance, right?" And I was like, "No, no, no, you got to get the 8 Immortals." And they responded, they were like, "Hey, I don't really like the way the 8 Immortals is processed." And that brought up a question for me. I was thinking about it because I'm like, I don't really know. Are the different varietals, are they processed any differently?
Not really. No. I mean, it would be based on the maker. It would be based on the maker's knowledge of their fields, of their bush, of the weather that day. And so, like Wei, like I've been hanging out with Wei for so long. He's the one who makes the pomelo fragrance, and he has such a clear idea of like how was the weather this day when this was being made. And then it's like, oh, he needs to give it more heat. He needs to roast it higher because it was rainy that day. And so it's like, or that couple days, because like I said, all the dance songs get picked around the same time.
So that sounds like it's probably maybe the takeaway then. Maybe instead of saying, "Hey, I do or don't like this varietal of dance song," it's see which one is better this year from any given. Like it's going to be different, even like not even just like company to company could be completely different, right? Like your Bastian might not be as good this year, where another company's might.
I'm just laughing at the idea like, oh, everyone's Bashan's great this year. I guess you could have an element of that if the weather was perfect during the Bashan season. But usually what happens is like, yeah, like you'll have like, oh, Wenzitong's Bashan is so good right now. Hop on that.
So I think the worst thing at the beginning of a video, on any video, is like, "Hey guys, we're back. It's been a long time," right? Like it's just like, okay, nobody cares. Like when they see the video, they're excited to watch it, and that's how kind of we feel about the podcast. Like this is where Derek and I kind of get to chill and talk about the things that we didn't make the cut, like in other videos we did or in other things that we have going on. And we've kind of talked a lot because we haven't been on the podcast in a while, about how we want to change it a little bit. And instead of having one main theme, have these kind of smaller sub themes of just different things of our life as it relates to China and tea and teaware and everything we're doing. Um, and I'm interested, Derek. You had something. Didn't you have something about like the cold brews in one of your reels this week that you didn't have all the information or like you weren't able to fit everything in?
In a reel recently, I talked about like cold brew tea, and like the whole reel was like in China they don't drink cold drinks. And while that is largely true, it's not 100% true. And so like let's talk about, right now I'm drinking cold brew tea and I'm loving it. But at the same time, like Dart, you have experience living in China, and like did you see people drinking cold drinks ever? Because I Derek told me that they don't.
So that was kind of one of the funny things, like the first year that we got there, because I feel like anytime you move somewhere new, you don't know, right? You don't know what the customs are, you don't know what the expectations are, and that was one of the things that we heard iterated a bunch was you're drinking too many cold drinks. You need to drink more hot drinks. Drink hot water, not cold water. But we got there in winter, right? And so we're talking about heating up our bodies and the air conditioners, as we've talked about in other Between the Cracks episodes. They're rarely on. Typically, you're bundling up in the winter, and so you're using more natural means to control your body heat. In addition to probably not having clean water in China not too long ago, right? So there's like these things that kind of go into the daily life in winter. And we got to our first summer, and some of the teaching assistants, some of the TAs at the school, were bringing in cold water bottles. Like, just completely didn't phase them. But for us, it was weird because for 6 months, we'd been told no cold drinks, no cold drinks. And so I think, yeah, there's obviously truth in that. But getting into the nuance of like when and how and like when cold is okay, I feel like is something that yeah, you don't have time in a 1 minute reel. And if somebody's never been to China before, it would be very noticeable. Like it is very noticeable when people tell you not to drink cold drinks.
Yeah, and like the culture shock is huge. Like when you go to a restaurant in summer and they'll pour you a glass of warm water. Like no there's no ice. There's no ice in these restaurants. like and it's just like really like hot water. I've burnt my mouth so many times when I first get to China.
That's I have friends burning their mouth all the time drinking tea with me because they don't realize like you get so accustomed to slurping the boiling water.
Yeah, I'm like going to like a convenience store and I'll see like a big cooler with like a bunch of drinks in it. I open it up and the cooler is off, right? I open it up, I just get this musty waft of like warm air. I'm like, why even have this? It's just a shelf. And then only in like the hot summer do they turn them on again. So it's like, I would say like 90% of the time they're not drinking cold drinks. But of course, when you make any definitive statement, it's not necessarily true. Like, they don't use variable temperature kettles in China.
Yep, yep.
You look at like, okay, like what are my experiences? What have I seen? I'm like, oh, that's a big difference. Where it's like in China they don't really care about it. But then of course you go into like fancy tea houses and they have variable temperatures. But you go into like most houses and they're just boiling water. They're boiling as hot as it can be, pouring into vessels.
Like in Chaozhou, they're not really using Chaozhou teapots, right? Like largely, right? When we talk about like most people, it's such a tea city. We've talked about this before, right? It's such a tea city that most people just have a porcelain gaiwan set. So like it's hard because yeah, especially in like short form content, you can't qualify things, right? You're making a definitive or somewhat definitive statement, um, which is hard to get around. But yeah,
One cool thing about that is it creates conversation. What is that law of the internet where it's like instead of asking for an answer, you say the wrong answer and somebody immediately will correct you.
speaking of which, so kettles. Okay, I've been geeking out about kettles for the last 2 weeks, and I had the Fellow kettle, which is like a $220 kettle. I've had that for years, and then I had my Bodum kettle, which is like your cheapest. It's like a black painted kettle, and it has like a cork handle and a cork like button on top, and that's like $35. You can find it on sale all the time. But I wanted to get another nice kettle, and I got the Barista kettle, and it just felt cheap to me. It was like $170, and it felt cheap to me. And like I didn't want to trash the brand. Like I didn't want to like, but I really was just like, I don't know. I don't know what to say. Like I was expecting more. Like I was expecting it to feel nicer. And I was very thankful that one, everyone took it very well. Like no one was like, oh, like this is my favorite kettle ever. I try really hard not to be too harsh, but I also feel like, especially in like creating content, my opinion, like if I'm not giving my actual opinion, then I feel like it's not very useful for the people that I'm talking to. Like it's not helpful for my followers. Like I owe it to them first to give like my actual opinion, and it didn't seem that nice. But because I said that, I got so many recommendations on kettles. Some of them people were like, telling me about ones that were like only on Alibaba, and I'm like, okay, well that's not like we're mainly talking with a Western audience, and like you're not going to be able to service that. You're not going to be able to fix it. It's only in Chinese, and so for me, it was like, yeah, like okay, I could appreciate that, but I don't think that's going to be useful for like most of my followers. Um, and so I got the OXO, the OXO kettle, and I painted it with a high heat paint that was supposed to be able to hold heat. And my whole room smelled like a chemical bomb as soon as I heated up the kettle.
And then it's like, okay, this is the vessel for brewing your nice teas. Ugh. Did the smell go away?
This is the fun talk. So Mark texted me right after. So Sanguine Teapots, he's really good, not just with wood. He's a really knowledgeable guy about materials and stuff. Like I'm always shooting him texts and questions about things. And so he said, hey, maybe like how long did you let it cure, right? And it does say like on the can, right? It says, hey, make sure you let it cure for I think it's 5 days or 7 days or something like that. And I didn't the first time I heated it up. So I waited a couple more days and I heated it back up. Unfortunately, the smell's still there. I was hoping it would kind of be one of those things where like I thought it was, and then it was actually safe. I don't think it's gonna be safe. I think unfortunately, I'm out that kettle. But it's an amazing kettle.
Okay, I was wondering. I was kind of lost in the sauce there, where I was like, okay, so like you bought the The fellow kettle is the one you like that you've had for a long time. You bought the Bodum. It's cheap, affordable. I think I always had a Bodum back in America. If that says anything about me, yeah. What does your kettle choice say about you? Then you got the barista, right? And the barista is a brand I thought would be very high quality, just like the name implies. Like I think I see it here a lot. It looks great, but is that real wood?
No, that's the thing. That's what made me so upset. It's $170 kettle, and it's like I don't want to scratch it off, but it's just like a plastic like dip. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like, and again, like I have an old video that I never finished on YouTube, or that I just didn't get the B-roll for it, so I never released it. Of the fellow kettles, but the fellow, I think the starting price is like $150 or $60, and if you go up $30, you can get the Pro. Um, and the thing that I like about the Pro is not the wood. So the wood you can get in the basic one. In the lid, they have like this soft material. It's like a silicone suction, so you don't actually feel the metal on metal contact, which you feel on pretty much every other kettle. It's really satisfying. It's really nice. Like, is it worth $30? Like when you and they have the on the feet as well. Is it worth $30? I don't know, but it definitely feels more premium. And that was like I was upset at like looking at like $180, and it just felt cheap.
That's very interesting. And I think it's a fine line between like, like you said, you don't want to trash the brand, but you want to give your honest opinion. And I think there's obviously easy ways to do that if you're respectful, if you have the narrative about it. Uh, but yeah, it's I could see where it's just like I don't know if I really want to say this because I want to be so friendly and stuff. But and so right now you have the purple kettle is which brand?
The purple one is the OXO OXO. I looked it up whether what the company says. No idea. It's literally OXO. This would be even when it's not purple. Don't paint it. My kettle of recommended choice for sure. Um, I think it's $100 full price, but you can find it. They're all on sale for like $30 off all the time. But it has to the degree temperature control. The other things that it has that I like even more are the base is really small. It doesn't take up like a huge profile. The balance is really good. It's 1 liter, so it's really big. A lot of people were recommending kettles that were like $50 or $70, and I've bought a couple. I've looked at a couple, but they look cheap and they feel cheap. And like if you have all handmade teaware, it's like yeah, that one technically still does variable temperature, but like you have a really nice set of teaware. Why would you not just spend $30 more or $20 more on a kettle that's going to match that?
We talk about like what's the most useful piece of teaware, right? And so when useful, like is that the one you use the most? Like you can't make tea without a kettle. You use that in every single session, even if the teaware changes.
Yeah, I actually, speaking with the Bodum, so I replaced the Bodum, the knob, with the one from my OXO kettle because now I can't use it and my cork was getting loose on this, and now like brought this back to life too. So I've been on a kettle journey the last couple weeks.
One thing though that I really wanted to talk about is the kind of the engineering of the pot itself. And so are these all gooseneck kettles?
Yeah, so all the ones that I just showed are gooseneck. I do have one of Fellows that's the V mouth. There's a couple companies that have come out with like the V spout ones. Um, but I think if we're trying to just compare apples to apples, it just makes more sense to have the gooseneck with the really skinny, really skinny spout.
What's interesting about this is why I bring it up. I'm sitting with a bunch of like Zhang Yin Chao's pots, right? These Chaozhou pots. Sorry, this is a new pot that's on the way. You'll get it soon. But yeah, so that's the Gordy. I got the Sunken Treasure here as well, right? And so are these goosenecks?
I don't know. I like the lotus leaf, right? That's the Chinese, right? I like lotus leaf. Sounds better to me than gooseneck.
But I think like what's interesting here is look at the the engineering of it. Like what makes this shape more superior to if the spout was up here, right? Not only like that would be difficult to pour, but Zhang Yan Chao says like if you're always pouring from the bottom of the teapot, like no tea is getting stuck in the pot, right? You're getting all of that like this tea that's been steeping the longest out the soonest. And so like this is really good for teas that over steep very easily, like Dansong Oolong, that get really bitter really quick. You want the tea that's been in there the longest out the quickest.
Yeah, this is another thing that Mark and I talk about because I feel like it's kind of a I don't know misnomer myth. The idea that like the clay is the most important thing. One, I don't think it's true, But two, if you have someone who's drinking a specific type of tea, whether it's intentional and conscious or subconscious, they will start to develop techniques for that. And so, like, John can name, why it fits because he's primarily drinking, dancehall oolongs out of it. Like, this is terrible. I try to put white tea, some big leafy whites in. It chugs, it drips. It's just like it doesn't work because that's not what it was like designed for. I don't care how good the clay, could match up with it. The shape just doesn't make any sense, like with the white tea. So
That's a really cool counter narrative to be like, yeah, like what's more important, the clay or the shape? Like, what do you use that teapot for? It's based a lot on the shape of the teapot, right? Like this is, yeah, like you said, this would be terrible for loose leafy whites. And then like the way he has it, it's really made for dancong oolongs.
part of the issue I have with the like, oh, it's the clay, is you're basically taking away all the skill of the artist. Like to me, it just feels like a like keeping the myth of tea to be more interesting than like the actual real life practice of it. Like Jong's an artist making teapots, and I feel like Mark and I get into this all the time too, where it's like, what was the intentionality of the potter? And people don't talk about it. Nobody's talking about the narrative of like the artist or the potter. It's always just like, oh, what did the clay do for the tea? It's just it feels like we're taking out one of the artisans.
Yeah, I'm gonna put a mark on my back here and just be like, man, Factory One, like it's every single piece I've seen from Factory One. I'm like, this looks like a child could make this. This is such bad craftsmanship. Lid doesn't fit. This is wonky, and I know a little bit about Chinese history. I know a little bit about, factories in China, and I know the type of stuff they were making in these like state-owned enterprises. It's just mail it in. It is everybody is getting the same amount of money and it's not very much. If you make 2 teapots or if you make 50 teapots, and it's like there's no oversight, there's no control, there's no passion in it. It's really like if you get into this socialist idea, like it is artless. And so it's like then it's like okay, you only want it for the clay and you just ignore everything else. I'm like this is not for me. Like I do not like the feeling of this pot because it feels heartless.
There's some nuance there, right? So like this is the pot from Zizha Gallery from Yanni, right? It's a beautiful pot, and her and I were talking about how like the lid fit on this isn't perfect, right? And we were her and I had a whole long conversation about lid fit, and she was mentioning how well it's actually easier to make the lid too big and grind it down to perfect than it is to account for the shrinkage rate, right, when you're firing, which is true. But again, arguably, what was the intention? Like, you could have, and this was like going back to a reel that is so old, and it's really bad, but the concept holds up. Some of the cheapest teaware and most expensive teaware has the most similarity. And this is one of those cases where like a loose lid fit could be a sign of the fact that it was made in a factory, it was cast, right? Or it could be a sign of a master who didn't want to grind down the lid and wanted to account for the shrinkage. And so there's a little tiny bit of variance, but it's still not ridiculous. Where it's like it's all on that spectrum of again, I think like asking the question, how was it designed? Who made it? What was the intention and thought? But yeah, the lifeless teapot. I don't. Yeah, that's another topic for another day.
You go on other sides where it's yeah, like glorification of the clay at the expense of everything else, I think is not the right way. Total ignorance of the clay is also not the right way. And so you're always trying to find that middle path.
Speaking of middle path, so I had this Yuechao Gaiwan. This is one of the one. This is the one that I broke doing a video.
Ugh.
So you can see. So it was just circular, and you can kind of see right here where it got worse, right along the edge. So I'm gonna try. We'll see how it goes. I'm gonna get a sheet of silver sheet metal and cut it down. And I'm gonna try and do a repair. I want to get the tools. I have some of them already, but I want to start doing some of the silver repair work just for my own stuff, like the staples, the jutsu, right, and then like adding a part to the corner just because I think it would be a cool like I don't really know anyone who's doing it. Like I know people who are doing kintsugi and stuff like that, but this is one of my favorite guy ones, and I still use it all the time even though it's broken. But yeah,
I also had a broken Yuechao one, but I changed it. I brought it to a guy. He did copper staples in there, and it just looks absolutely stunning. He had to drill into it, put in the staples, like fix it together. He was using like egg white, like an egg white like binding agent. And so like he didn't use any modern kind of glues or anything like that. Really cool. And I think like yeah, like just do it for your joy, right? And not be like, oh, I'll do this and then I'll sell it and I'll make a company. It's like, okay, just pursue your passion for a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna do it like it'll probably show up in a video because I'm excited about it, but I'm not. There's no. Don't please don't start asking. I'm not doing silver repair. Speaking of which, though, we do have our Yue Chow drop this month. I've been sitting on this. This has been my favorite pork cup for months. That has not seen the light of day yet. Yeah, I think are these the Crucible? I don't even remember what we named them. I think it's the Crucible. I think we call these the Crucible. Um, but they match the Dragon's Breath Gaiwan. So we have Yue Chow. I'll probably do a reel about it. But the reason I don't know, Yue Chow is special for me is because I don't really like a lot of handmade gaiwans. Like, I find it really hard to find a handmade gaiwan that can't just be performed in a factory gaiwan. Like, the shape itself is kind of already figured out, right? It's a solved puzzle. It's not like a teapot where every individual one can be interesting. His are the only handmade gaiwans that I really use, and so it'll be exciting to have both the pork cups and then his drippy bowls as well.
Yeah, those are so cool. Yeah, I mean he does all of my master cups, right? He does all of my gaiwans. His artistry, his style, everything about it. For me, that's the quintessential craftsmanship of a perfect gaiwan. Another thing we got Yue Chao to do that we didn't see him doing before because he always makes these 100 milliliter gaiwans, right? Pretty small boys. And then we're like, do you have any big ones? And he's like, yeah, we can make some big ones. And so he made us some massive gaiwans, some big bowl party boys.
The Frost Giants, yeah. Forgot about those. Yeah. Those will be out next week too.
And it's still in his style, just a little larger, more bowl shape. It's cool.
Well, Derek, keep making more reels. Seen you started kicking them out. I want to see more. I want to see your beautiful face on Instagram more. But otherwise, we'll do this again soon.
Yeah, no, it's a good conversation. I like just the free form of it. Yeah.